Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
You have no idea what is upon us now.
What more could you want? Bill Martinez live. Turn it up.
Turn it up, turn it loud. We've got a country to save here at 28 minutes before the top of the hour. Bill Martinez, I am. And Jim Gibson joins us, the former Trump executive. And we're going to be talking about Bill Maher's remark. And when he heard that, he was instantly reminded of a long ago meeting at CBS. So once again, proving that a leopard does not change its spots quite easily. Does it, Jim?
It does not, Bill. It's what goes around comes around, and it's just coming around again.
Yeah, the whole idea, I mean, Hillary Clinton looked at flyover country and anybody that supported conservative values as being deplorable, and this was just more of the same, was it not?
It was. I've just used the term, instead of deplorable, I've used the term disposable.
Yes.
He just, as my experience when I dealt with CBS, has a mindset. And, you know, Bill, I mean, I'm sure there's political overtones in everything Bill Maher says. It's almost beyond political, where it's just the arrogance of a mindset that really looks down, looks over, just does not care about those of us between the coast. And I experienced that in my many years in the entertainment world, working both in New York and LA.
Right.
And I'd be happy to share about that as it goes on. But, you know, that's where it's at. That's where it's always been. And moving back to my roots in the Midwest in Illinois, it just, there was a reason for that, and I can share a little bit about that as well. It isn't that I don't love people on both coasts. There's wonderful people across America, Bill, and I'm not saying the same thing that Bill Maher said. There's great people everywhere. However, these people of power have a way of controlling a lot of what the rest of the world sees. And if they don't feel we're important or we're disposable or we're deplorables, that's what we're going to be fed pretty much 24/7.
Exactly. Well, people that make these kind of irresponsible remarks need to be called out for what they are. We certainly know from not too long ago history what people were looked at and what happened to people that were considered to be less than and disposable. We had a Holocaust that took place. You would think that that would be enough to temper the language. I understand there's going to be antithetical viewpoints. You know, that's what we love about this country. Freedom of thought, freedom of ideas, freedom of speech. But when it gets to the point that we begin to disqualify people and present them as being less than, then we've crossed over. We have disrespected and we have done things to obliterate what our Constitution talks about in terms of a right. With every right comes responsibility. And Bill Maher was terribly irresponsible in making the statements that he said, and he should be called out for it.
I agree. And Bill, correct me if I'm wrong. Is that not a prejudice statement that he throws out across the airwaves simply because we are from some area of the United States that we immediately fall into a categorization of basically saying we're the joke of America. We're again the disposables, those that are just not smart. We're not cool. We're not at the same level. I don't know about you, but that is as prejudiced as any racial prejudice that
it totally is
in the day.
It's absolutely disgusting. And the fact of the matter is he's so delusional, but this is what elites do. They convince themselves that they're so special and everybody wants to be like them. You know what? They don't. They don't want to be, you know, they're glad that they're not like them. And in many cases, because many of the people, and I'd say, as you said, Jim, and rightfully so, many people across the country would be praying for the Bill Mahers and the elites that think this way, because it is inhuman to have that kind of consideration. It's sad. And when you, again, consider recent history and what that kind of stinking thinking did to a culture and to a people, and particularly to a race and to the less thans, it energized a Holocaust that people to this day are devastated at its consideration, but yet not enough to where when Bill Maher speaks so recklessly that he's not called out for it. I mean, it's totally shameful.
You know, the quote that you're kind of talking about might bear, I have it in front of me, and this was the one that nauseated me the most, which is kind of what you just said. His quote was, "The flyover states have become the passed-over states. That's why red state voters are so pissed off. They don't hate us. They want to be like us. They want to go to the party." That's what you were saying. I don't want to be like Bill Maher. There's a reason why I don't no longer live in Los Angeles. I chose not to. I don't want to be. But,
tell us that story, Jim, because I lived south of I was in LA radio, and so I was around the reindeer games and stuff like that. And I will tell you frankly, when I was working at a major station in LA, because I'll tell you honestly, I didn't smoke pot. And I worked with the likes of Wolfman Jack and, during that period of time in the 70s when I got out of the Marine Corps. And they said, whoa, wait a minute, you're Hispanic. You don't do pot, you must be selling it or you're growing it or something, because you're Hispanic, because that's what Hispanic. I go, what are you talking about? You have no idea. But because I didn't do pot, I wasn't allowed to go to the reindeer games, and the cocktail parties. And you know what, Jim? I didn't miss it. I didn't miss one song or one iota of it. I did not want to be beholden to that crowd in any form or fashion.
Yeah, I agree, and that's in the late 80s, early 90s when I began working with now President Trump. That's when I was out there. Also, Bill, I was doing a lot of game show pilots for Merv Griffin and some other shows that we were working on. I was on his show quite often as a vocalist. I was on Star Search and had won a lot of different talent type of programs. I was working my way up through the entertainment world while also doing some business things. But what really brings this full circle is I don't know if we want me to go to this immediately, is when I had to meet with Les Mooves at CBS.
Yes, go ahead. Let's go.
It was an interesting setup because I was the guy, Bill, that hosted almost all of the televised state pageants for Miss Universe, Miss USA, and Miss Teen USA. That would include Miss California, which was televised out there. I was their host. Or Miss Texas, or Miss Alabama. I did about 150 of these telecasts. I was the most used guy in that unique business at that time. And so when Miss Universe became available, Madison Square Gardens was going to sell it. And I had already met Donald, who now is, of course, our president, became a friend. We had done some things. I did some shows, produced shows down in Atlantic City. Long story short, I went to the president and said, I think this will be a great opportunity. I've been doing this for a long time. It's a great pathway to help young women get to where they need to go. Somebody born in New York or L.A. or Miami, it's a little easier, but when you're in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, Des Moines, Iowa, or, North Dakota, it's not easy. So I was sharing with him not just a great financial opportunity, but I just think it's a great thing, period. And he agreed. So he worked out a deal. We worked it through. He bought Miss Universe in 1997, and he then immediately turned around and sold 50% of it to CBS so that it would be televised, the very bright business move. Moves. So Les Mooves, of course, was the president of CBS, suddenly his new business partner. So one of the things when we talked about this, the question would be, is it going to be a West Coast pageant? Is it going to be an East Coast event? What's this going to be? So when I sat down and talked with Donald, we chatted through this. He liked the idea of keeping it a grassroots opportunity to help young women elevate them in their careers. He totally bought into that. It wasn't going to be a runway model show. It wasn't going to be an MTV special. He wanted to keep it a Midwest traditional stepping stone for women. So he wanted me to fly out to meet with Les Mooves on his behalf, and he made me his director of pageant affairs. And I helped produce and do a lot of events with him with the Universe pageant. So I flew out. I met with Les Mooves. I'd never met him before.
Hey, Jim, you know about this because you're a pro and you understand that, occasionally we got to go through interruptions and we got a little bit of a break coming. And we'll leave people on the edge of their seats for just a moment for you to come back and finish up the Les Mooves story. It's quite interesting. More from Jim Gibson after this. Stay with us, America. It's 18 before the top of the hour.
honest, the left is unhinged. The most affluent and educated people are clustered in just a few cities. The blue parts of America are having a big prosperity party, while that big sea of red feels like their invitation got lost in the mail. The flyover states have become the passed-over states. That's why red state voters are so pissed off. They don't hate us. They want to be us. They want to go to the party.
No, we don't. That's Bill Maher. Jim Gibson continues with it. Hey, just a little bit. Jim, I was reading about your background. I mean, you've had 3 different Grammy Award-winning bands that you worked with. Bill Gaither Trio for gospel, and Bill Gaither is just such a tremendous man and mentor, and just a Christian brother. And B.J. Thomas as well. I interviewed B.J. Thomas years ago. This is, believe it or not, this is Knott's Berry Farm in Buena Park, California. And what a hoot. BJ, he was so funny. He comes to me and goes, "Oh, you're Hispanic," and he tries to talk Spanish, and he's just making up words. And you probably have been around that routine, because the way it came off so natural and well practiced. I know that he probably threw it on lots of people, but we had so much fun.
What year was that? I might have been with him when you interviewed him at Knott's Berry Farm, because I played in the band when we played there once.
Oh, did you really? That would have been in the early 70s?
No, I was closer to the end of the 70s. But
okay.
You know what?
Yeah.
I was really fortunate, though, Bill, on that side of my life. Of course, the Gaither Trio was probably the highlight of my life on a spiritual platform. Yeah. And just the ability to be with people on a tour bus when they're writing some of the most spectacular songs, and they're just down-to-earth, real people from, again, the Midwest, another disposable, I guess, from Indiana.
Yeah.
And of course, BJ was just a great guy. The thing I remember most about BJ was he never put himself on a different platform than the rest of the band members, and in that world, that's another oddity. So I was just very fortunate, and then the third Grammy band was Lionel Hampton, which was jazz, and that's when I performed for President Reagan and President Bush in the White House at the Congressional Ball, all the way back in the late '80s and early '90s. So,
what do you like? Do you like pinch yourself in the middle of the night and just said, "That was me"? I mean, you're like the Forrest Gump of music almost.
It's funny. It's funny you say that, because that's exactly what a newspaper reporter by the name of Denise Crosby out here for the Tribune called me. And I'm sincere. There's always somebody better, more talented, and younger, and probably better looking. I was just very, very fortunate. And I worked really hard, Bill. I mean, I really worked at my craft, and so when the opportunity was there, I was very fortunate. But what I learned, and this is what got me into television, that's great, and that's fun,
right?
But the music career is a fleeting career, so I moved over to broadcasting and had my own TV show where I won an Emmy in Chicago. And that's what got me to the pageant thing, which got me to the now president, which got me to Miss Universe, which got me to the president of CBS Television. It's always a long and winding road.
It always is, but as long as you stay faithful to it, it's quite the ride. So good fun for you. So let's get back to Les Mooves. So you have this meeting with him. You're all excited about the expansion of the beauty pageant, industry, what's going on, Donald Trump's involvement. I mean, and everything with Donald Trump is bigly, right? Everything's bigly.
Everything is bigly, but he, and we could talk for days on the president, as you do, his drive to do things right, for me, was such a learning curve. You're in the entertainment business. You know how hard and competitive it is.
Right.
But when I was now working in his offices, representing him out of New York, the Big Apple, where no one sleeps, and if you make it there, you make it anywhere.
Right.
It was a whole new thing, and I realized quickly his goal, because pageants come and go, Bill, they become outdated, they need to be reinvented, and they're not forever, and they're not for everybody.
Right.
But he wanted to help this institutional opportunity, again, for young women. And by the way, when he did buy it, who did he make president of the music? A woman.
Yes.
And then another woman, not a guy. For the first time ever, he made a woman the president of Miss Universe. So he's always trying to help, believe it or not, what you hear out there, help women. And that was the purpose of this. And so when I went out there, and by the way, he also really wanted to understand America. Donald was huge in New York. I mean, he owned New York. He was on Saturday Night Live. He was on all the New York newspapers all the time. But, the rest of us out here, we just kind of saw him, once in a while. But now he really had an interest in America, which this pageant grassroots thing was a part of. And he wanted to understand it. And so when I look back now, he transferred that right into his political run. He understands us out here in the Midwest.
Exactly.
He knows exactly where we're coming from, and he did there. So off I go to Les Mooves to pitch that story to Mr. Mooves. And Mr. Mooves was polite. I have no bad words at all to say. Very, very, very direct, which I like, because sometimes you get a lot of around the board talk. I didn't just cut to the chase. So I'm telling him what Mr. Trump wanted me to tell him about this grassroots Midwest, a great thing for young women, and he just stopped me. I was like.
And this is right after CBS paid for half of the interest in the pageant, right?
That's correct. That's
right.
correct. So you have two very, very powerful men. You got Les Mooves and you got Donald Trump. And I'm this guy that's kind of going between these two guys. and both have a very direct vision of what they want. But Les held the TV side, so that's a big hammer, as you know, Bill.
Right.
So I'm trying to talk Mr. Mooves into the vision that Mr. Trump has. And about halfway through my presentation, he just stopped me cold and just said very politely but very directly, Jim, I'm telling you right now, we don't care about the Midwest. That's not what we're trying. That's not my market. That's not who I have interest in. I deal with both coasts. That's the market I drive. So all this talk and all this chat I had with now President Trump and all these hopes that we had hoped would happen with this institution called Miss Universe organization, he just with a sweep of his hand says, ain't going to happen. We don't care about the Midwest. Done.
Wow.
So it was the same way, just a little more polite. About the same amount of ego, though. Right. Bill Maher said when he says, you know what, we're the flyover state. Right. We are not on their radar, Bill. And
so Jim, help me understand here. So when the Nielsen's come out, they extract all the Midwest numbers.
Yeah, but I think they've done.
Of course, I'm being facetious, because they're not going to, they want those Midwest numbers to help fortify any kind of popularity. They may not, care much about it, but in the number of things as TV, programs get renewed and canceled based on their numbers.
They do. And by the way, it was no surprise when Mr. Mooves went this direction that Mr. Trump and Mr. Mooves, butted heads a little bit. And sure enough, we made that decision. Let's get out of this CBS thing. So what we ended up doing after our 5-year contract was up with CBS, we bought out CBS out, and NBC stepped in, and they bought the rights. It went much better, and as we now know, that also opened up the door for The Apprentice, which was on NBC.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it was a brilliant move by Mr. Trump, quite frankly. If you really think about it, he's used that all the way through The Apprentice, and I would have to say, I would think The Apprentice had a big help with him running for president as well. He was somebody that everybody saw once a week for 12 years.
Sure, and you tie into that, WWF, and Jim McMahon and the Wrestling Federation and that, which did endear him to, what you want to describe as the flyover states, because this is, the heart and soul of America right there represented as far as the audience is concerned. So, you look at those separate things, what he did with the pageant, what he did with, wrestling, what he did with, The Apprentice. It's no wonder he is where he is today.
Bill, I don't know if you saw the Oscars, pardon me, but I don't know if you heard Lady Gaga's quote. I was interviewed a couple of days ago, and I used this again. I've been asked a zillion times when he was running. I don't know if you realize it, but I was married at Mar-a-Lago, and Donald and Melania are the signing witnesses.
I saw the picture. I saw that. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so that you could say we're pretty close.
Yes.
At that point, that doesn't happen often.
How can you be around Melania? She's so stunning.
You know what? And she, honestly, Bill, she is absolutely the sweetest, most humble. When he was dating her, it was interesting. It was unfortunate he had gotten divorced from Marla Maples, who, by the way, was in the Miss Georgia pageant that I hosted before she met the president. But he would ask me, "What do you?" I said, "Donald, I mean, you're out of your mind. This lady is almost. How could you ever do better than Melania? She's just wonderful, you know, and but as sweet as can be, and a wonderful mother. Her family is her priority. But, you know, how do you, I'm asked a lot, well, what is he really like, you know? And of course, like anybody, there's many, you know, we're all complex to some degree, but if I had to pull it down to a quote, I love Lady Gaga's quote when she won her Oscar, and this is what it is. It reminds me exactly of the Trump philosophy. It's not about winning, but what it's about is not giving up. If you have a dream, you fight for it. If there's a discipline for passion, and it's not about how many times you get rejected or you fall down or you're beaten up, it's about how many times you stand up and are brave and you keep on going. Yeah. I think our president has stood up. I think he's brave. And that's the qualities that I would want my president to have. And he has that.
Well, Jim, you and I grew up with that. I mean, we know about rejection. Anything that had to do with the media and entertainment, that's what you're faced with, and it's all a matter. And so what Lady Gaga, it's interesting you should bring that up, because when I heard her say that, it spoke volumes to my very soul, because I could definitely relate to it. No wonder you could relate to it as well, and many others.
You can, because the odds are always against us, Bill, in life.
Without a doubt.
So
you got it.
We do our best, and we help each other.
Well, we got to leave it and call it a wrap there. Jim Gibson on Bill Martinez Live. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it.